I would like to talk to you about what this sovereignty is that we say we are losing, and why it is so important, and what it is that is the difference between why we don't fit in with what Europe is like and what we are like. Churchill and de Gaulle, both of them, those of you who are old enough to remember, will remember that they both set their faces against us jointly for very good reasons, because they knew that British legal, political and geographical structures and cultures did not fit with European ones, and there was a very good reason for that. I'm going to start with Boadicea. There is a gene in the Anglo-Saxon human being which recognizes fairness, and we do not like being governed by somebody else. 1066 was the last time we were invaded by a foreign power. We've had 1,000 years to develop our culture. Boadicea didn't like being ruled by somebody else, and she lost that particular battle. Hereward the Wake didn't like being ruled by William of Normandy when he won, and he lost that particular battle. But there is something that gets at us very deeply when things are not fair, and that's the Anglo-Saxon, what I call the Anglo-Saxon gene. Now, what the Normans brought with them was a kind of rationality, a kind of ability to think. It's all very well wanting to be fair, but you have to have a process that can decide what is fair and what is not fair. And that is what the Normans brought with their particular different way of approach. In 1154, Henry II was elected to the post of Lord Chancellor, by which anybody could take their case to be heard by trial by jury, which we started just before Magna Carta, in fact. And we developed that legal system of ground upwards representation of the people, where you were being judged by your own peers. And gradually, the fairness gene and the rational gene began to fuse. And my word, at the time, it was difficult. The Anglo-Saxons were the underdog, and the rationality, the Normans, held sway. But gradually, as the centuries went by, they began to fuse. We successfully fought against Philip II and the Armada, because we believed that the way of life that was evolving was worth protecting. Then we had the Civil War, where you got the final reconciliation of this rational gene from the Normans on the king's side, and the Anglo-Saxon gene of fairness on the Parliament side. And we had that enormously destructive civil war where a quarter of the British manhood were cut down. And that, coupled with the Wars of the Roses from the previous 100 years or so, taught us that war is never the solution to any problem. All that war does is says, thus far and no further, and if you do not stop, we will stop you by force. But it doesn't do anything to reconcile the opposing opinions. That has to be done by talk. And we developed the Parliament. And we've got this way of talking. And that has been developed over a number of years, so that Britain has exported the Parliament way of doing things to the rest of the world. And we've got the respect of the rest of the world, and we still have the respect of the rest of the world because of those systems that we developed and exported. But the Civil War blended the two into what is now known as the constitutional monarchy, where the king or queen has the absolute authority, but delegates that authority to elected representatives, who, if you don't like what the elected representatives do, you can chuck them out. It does put the king or queen into some difficulty when the elected representatives don't do things that are particularly popular. And I have some feeling for the situation that the present sovereign might have, and I don't want to put thoughts or words into her mind at all, but I'm not quite sure how in agreement she is with what is going on at the moment, but there is nothing that she can do about it because she cannot interfere, because that authority to make the decisions has been delegated to others. As far as the legal structure is concerned, we've got habeas corpus, which we've had for over 300 years. Habeas corpus says if you are arrested by the state has to take you before a judge and say, this is why we've arrested him, this is the evidence we've got against him that is sufficient for us to arrest him. We've got Garrow, who developed the phrase innocent until proven guilty. Moving onwards, we developed the whole democratic of parish council, town council, district council, county council in a ground-up representation system that enables everybody to put their point of view. When you go down to the local shops, you see your local representatives, you can have a 30-second chat with him. He's aware that way, and all of the issues that he hears gets fed up through our local democratic system. That's, broadly speaking, enough of a synopsis of British sovereignty. Now let's look at the European way of doing things. Top down doesn't fit, can never ever fit with ground upwards. They're going to hit, and they have hit, and that is what causes one of the conflicts. Let's look at the legal element of it. Habeas corpus, for example. We have to go before a judge. The judge knows why people have been arrested. In Europe, you go before a judge who is a political appointment. The magistrate on the continent has power for his locality. In Britain, we've got common law since 1150, whatever it was, when the Lord Chancellor came to be. There is systems of law which have been written down, and judges now have tomes and tomes and shelves of previous judgments which they use, so that there is a consistency in our law. That does not exist abroad. One magistrate in one village can make one judgment. The next door village magistrate can make a totally different judgment on the same set of circumstances. That might be a slight exaggeration, but it isn't. It isn't an exaggeration of the way that their legal systems are set up. If you get arrested on the continent, the way it works is, right, judge, how can we agree this? That is what is the way it is working, and it's bound to create a conflict. And that's why it doesn't work, that's why it doesn't fit, we don't fit with them. Now, where do I go from here? Is there anything that I've said that anybody fundamentally disagrees with, or?
No, totally agree.
They also have guilty to prove innocent.
Exactly, the opposite ways of doing things. And of course, the geographical differences. It seems to me it's not a coincidence that it is only 3 countries in Europe that are not signed up to Schengen. Britain, Ireland and Cyprus. And what have they got all in common? They're relatively small islands. And it doesn't fit. Now, the thread that I should have put down is
Sorry.
has lost.
Could you explain more about the European arrest warrant?
Yes.
Oh,
It doesn't fit at all.
well, everybody knows exactly. Look at what happened to Ashington's parents. That is what the European magistrate can do, and that is what, to our eternal shame, as far as I'm concerned, the was it Portsmouth or Southampton? Their councils escalated upwards. That whole situation from a British court to issue to say to the Spanish authorities, go and arrest him. And he hadn't done anything wrong. It seems to me totally absurd the way in which the British people are still blind to what is going on. Because that European arrest, when I was canvassing in Lincolnshire, I knocked on a door, and the chap opened it in a dressing gown and said, sorry mate, I'm not very well. Okay. Ran to the next door. Now I was talking to the next door, and he got the dress, and he came round and he said, excuse me, can you come back? He said, I'd like to talk to you. He said, would you like a cup of tea? I said, not half. And he said, I was actually arrested. And I spent the next 3/4 of an hour talking to this chap, who had been arrested for something that had gone on in Holland. And he said, he was what? In his early 20s at the time. And it had gone on, the whole issue had gone on for over 5 years.
Oh, yes.
And it still wasn't resolved. It had cost him his relationship with his girlfriend or his fiancée. It had cost him his further education course. And it still wasn't resolved. It harks a little bit also to Amanda Knox, whose case was heard, because we've got double jeopardy in this country, where you can't be tried twice once you've been acquitted for the same crime. And of course, in Italy, it's the same system of European law, where she was tried, she was acquitted, she went back, and they said, oh sorry, we've changed our minds, you're going to have to come back and go to jail. And it just does not fit with the British way of doing things. That's why this sovereignty, this whole business of sovereignty, is so fundamental to why we don't fit. To the fact that we need to be friends, we need to trade. And it's the trade that we joined originally. Those of us in 1975 who remember the referendum, we were signing up to a common market, and he said, no, there's no sovereignty involved. It doesn't work. As far as I'm concerned, this election has been described in my own constituency as a two-horse race between the incumbent Conservative and somebody else who's got a lot of support who's an independent. And at one of the hustings recently, I said, it's absolutely right. It is a two-horse race. It goes on all the local headlines, it says it's a two-horse race. I said, yes, it is a two-horse race. There are two stables in this. There's Brussels and there's Westminster. If you vote for the Brussels stable, and you do that in several ways, you put your money on the Labour Party, the Conservative Party, the Lib Dems, in my case the Independent, who is very firmly pro-Europe, and of course, well, as a Green candidate, they are pro-Europe. Any of those horses, you will get Brussels. There's only one stable, and my got thoroughbreds in ours. that is going to give us Westminster. And of course, in 2020, it is going to be compulsory to sign up to the euro. We are not going to have another chance. It was relatively recent. And of course, nobody is saying that because it's not something that they want us to know. So it's really a two-horse race. It's a choice. And all of my recent leaflets have got Brussels or Westminster. It's your choice. That's the situation.
So if Greece had not been signed up to the euro, when they first started to get into trouble, they could have devalued their currency and saved themselves.
Yes.
That's one of the things I think.
Partially.
Yeah. One of the reasons why I think somebody's already talked to you about the immigration, the uncontrolled immigration issue. But of course, whilst Germany has to make a decision about whether it's going to fund the rest of the recession-ridden Euroland. And while they are making that decision, the whole of the European project is in a kind of limbo. And whilst they stay in a kind of limbo, and all of their nations are in recession, and there are no jobs, particularly for the younger people, where are they going to go? They've got free passage to come here.
Yeah.
And that's what they're going to do. And nobody seems to be taking on board that whilst the euro is in the way it is, and until Germany decides whether it's going to pick up the responsibilities that, in a way, Britain picked up when we had our empire, when we abolished slavery. For 30 years we patrolled the coast of West Africa with our ships and our guns and our sailors, and paid for it all. Captured the slave ships, delivered them on the coast of Sierra Leone as it was then, and built Freetown, all at the British taxpayers' expense. That was a responsibility we took on. And Germany, it seems to me, has now got to decide whether it's going to take on the same kind of responsibility to look after the rest of what are rapidly becoming satellites around it. And until they do that, we're going to be in exactly the same situation. Euroland, the Eurozone, isn't working. The famous quote from Mikhail Gorbachev, the EU is simply the Soviet Union in Western clothes. Why, oh why, hasn't Europe learnt, he's reputed to have said in 1992, why hasn't Europe learnt, with all of the lessons of history there are to draw upon, that the European Soviet system does not work? And the British people, at the moment, still haven't quite grasped. Mr. Cameron says, we negotiate what we don't like. In the papers recently, you would have said that Mr. Juncker has said there will be no treaty this side of 2020. Mr. Cameron said last November, it will need a new treaty. Which part of the word no doesn't Mr. Cameron understand? He is not going to be able to renegotiate.
But then one can also ask the question, and I've lived in Germany a long time, like the Germans, no bias, has Germany now succeeded in perpetrating the bloodless Fourth Reich? Perhaps it wants to take care of the rest of Europe from a different angle.
That's an area that is one of certainly a lot of contention, and a lot of people are going down that route. Yes. Whether they've achieved it or not, again, remains to be seen. But it's not
Actually, it certainly looks as though they're holding all the reins.
Well, Britain's place, this is why I think we need to use pride. Do tell me if you want me to stop.
Yes.
Please. We'll just deal with this last
Yes.
one. I think this is why we need to keep Trident, because Britain's had this 1,000 years of experience of developing a peaceful approach, because we understand how important it is. Europe are nations who are at best the French had their revolution in 1789, and all of the other European nations are younger, and they still have to go through the same process that we have already been through, and they have made it quite clear that they're not prepared to learn the lessons that we've already learned. So Britain's got this influence throughout the rest of the world as a result of the respect that we have got for what we have learned, which we have enabled, not always in the best ways possible, but we've been able to put it across, and other countries have taken it on board. And it seems to me that there are, going back to our history lesson, Cardinal Wolsey defined British foreign policy under Henry VIII. If any country in Europe gets too uppity, we will side with the others, with the weaker side. And that's the British foreign policy all the time. That's why we got involved with Napoleon, with the Kaiser and with Hitler, to defend our way of life.
And Poland.
And there's always, however idealistic you want to be, there's always going to be people in the world who want to take over. At the moment, we've got the Americans and the Russians. And I can't conceive of a situation where we would wish to side with the Russians at the moment. But it is conceivably possible that there are going to be two nations at each other's throats, and Britain still has the power to be the influence which can be a moderating, calming influence in a potentially explosive situation. If we give up trying it, we give up that place at that table, because every other country can sit with thumb their noses and say, talk as much as you like, you can't do anything else.